Spirit Quest Radio. Talk radio for your body, mind, and spirit. You are listening to Healing Journeys with your host, Jaentra Green Gardner, live from St. Paul, Minnesota. Jaentra with Healing Journeys broadcasts live every Thursday evening from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. In her over 30 years' experience, Jaentra knows how healing changes lives. Her guests share many perspectives to challenge and inspire you. She opens her heart to share knowledge and receive your stories. Talk to her and experience support for your life changes. Listen and learn simple healing techniques you can use at home. Now, here's Jaentra.
Hi, and welcome to Healing Journeys, and I'm Jaentra Green Gardner. Really glad to be back in your homes and in your hearts this week. What a week. Feels like a huge transformation is occurring in me. You know, that gets so old. Everybody's talking about transformation on the planet. And, you know, we had another earthquake in San Francisco yesterday, just a 5-point-something one. But the earth's shaken. I'm shaken. And it's a good thing. I got in touch this week with some deep inner core strength, and now I'm working to manifest that in my body. My body's felt a lot weak lately, you know, just through me. It's like, oh, I'm so tired. So I'm so glad at the opportunity of that may bring to change things. I think the deep inner core strength really got solidified on Tuesday night. Our group got together and did a healing of the dynamics around the oil spill. And we'll talk about that probably in a couple weeks when we don't have a guest on the radio. But I feel that a deep connection with Earth's love and consciousness and wisdom and compassion, you know, and remembering that the Earth is in charge of her healing, is in charge of things, and that we humans will let go of our greed and our consumption and our misuse of resources as she leads us to do it. And who knows what path that'll take us on, but it'll be interesting, very interesting. We're listening to a little background music like we always do from Judy Moen. Judy Moen is a local Wayzata, Minnesota composer, and we play Love to Africa in the background because that eliminates poverty in the energy field. So if you want, you can go to spiritquestradio.com store and buy their copy, you know, of her music, that music, and some other music that she's done. I am really glad to have Judy Connelly on our show again. Judy Connelly is a friend and a chaplain at Fairview University Hospital here in Minnesota. And that's the only hospital you get to go in and say, I'd like to have 3-heart balancing, and somehow that gets arranged through the nurse's station. And you can receive that. Chaplains do that. And I know she's going to talk about her ministry there, her use of 3-heart balancing, and some miracles. I had her on, I guess last fall sometime, and when I had a lot fewer listeners, and even then I got feedback from listeners that she was inspirational. So I thought, we have to have somebody inspirational on now that we got many, many, many more listeners. So that's great. And of course, I want to welcome Mark Wandersee, my co-host and friend. He's back.
Good evening.
Both of us are so relaxed. We talked about sleeping through the show and having Clyde, my wonderful wind beneath my wings, who's, if you have calls or questions or whatever, he makes sure the audio just runs so smoothly. So, but I don't think he's really willing to talk. He's not even looking at me like I'm serious. So
he's just grinning.
Yeah, like good luck with that. Okay, Mark, how about you introduce Judy in the formalized way?
I would be delighted to do that. Judy Connelly is a board-certified chaplain at the University of Minnesota Medical Center, Fairview. In her role as a chaplain, Judy draws on her theological and pastoral studies and her passion for 3-heart balancing, energy work, and her commitment to organizational development, her love for story and song, Maybe we'll get her to sing this evening. And her personal experience as a 2-time breast cancer survivor to support patients, their families, and also hospital staff. She has spent many years in intra and interpersonal development and continues to apply her interest and skills in that area by coaching leadership, presenting workshops, and consulting within Fairview Health Services. She is also the founder and principal of Taproot Resources, a consulting practice that works in church, educational, and healthcare settings to enhance collaboration, accomplishment, and well-being. She's full of life and love and a robust sense of humor, and we welcome her this evening to extend herself to touch the hearts of all of you as we share stories and talk this evening. So welcome back. Oh, and I must say,
thank you.
She also sits on the board of directors of the Healing Hands Network.
Yes, happily so.
And
Great to be here.
I'm glad you're here. And the Healing Hands Network is, for the very few of you who may not be aware, the nonprofit that does three-heart balancing. It's a volunteer network. It does education.
Correct. A 501c3 organization that's basically what I would consider supports the ministry of three-heart balancing and reaching out to people through our Circles of Hands work and going to hospitals and supporting
volunteer
the
work.
efforts. And lots of volunteer work, absolutely.
Yeah, currently we have 2 people that are receiving in-depth volunteer services. It's a couple that are married, and the man has a glioblastoma, which is a very aggressive brain tumor kind of cancer, and his wife has leukemia. And they have 4 children between 7 and 15. So I think that they are worked on 5 days a week by people in our network and
by our volunteers.
And they're doing really well. We also have volunteers going to the home of a shut-in lady up in northern Minnesota who can't get out of her home for various medical reasons. I know that's going on. And we probably have, 8 or 9 different volunteer projects going on at any one time.
Tell about the hospice.
Fairview Hospice. Yeah, we have volunteers that are part of Fairview Hospice. So Fairview Hospice is, if the families can have three-heart balancing practitioner, go to Fairview Hospice and do healing. And the nice thing about those healings is somebody who is dying can not only, they can be in pain, they can be really agitated, it's not easy sometimes with those kind of dying. Most of them are cancer, but I assume there are other things. And three-heart balancing seems to universally give a person a deep sense of peace and centeredness and calm them down and make them sleep. And so our volunteers are popular with Fairview Hospice, so we have that group too.
It almost it brings them to a point of homeostasis where they're calm
and imagine what it does for their loved ones who are standing around wanting to support them and feeling sometimes so powerless to be able to do that in a way that's meaningful. It really joins them together at a new level of peace that's very lovely.
Well, that's the thing about three-heart balancing. It's so easy to learn that the volunteers at Fairview Hospice, if the caregiver wants to know what to do, can teach them a couple of things to do for between times when they come back to help the person sleep or help the person calm down.
What I think is so great about it is it gives people an opportunity to actively engage in the healing of an individual. If that healing means that they leave this planet and they die, or if it means that they heal and they regenerate as a survivor, it helps that person engage with the one that needs the attention or the assistance.
We're doing three-heart balancing remotely on a young woman named Ariana, a 17-year-old who was running actually in a shopping mall and just had a heart attack and dropped. And her stomach acid got aspirated into her lungs, and she was on life support. And it took paramedics a long time to get there. They thought she had no brain. It looked like all the tests showed she had no brain activity. And It took us about 3-4 days. I think after 2 days, her heart was okay, and then her lungs were repaired, so she could start to breathe on her own. Gosh, this had to be maybe 5-6 weeks ago. Now she's in a rehab hospital. She's got brain activity. She's being rehabilitated. Getting her body to move again. So very interesting. Very wonderful, and of course, Larissa, who was Trish Marie's daughter. Trish Marie was one of our instructors who lived 3 blocks from me before they moved to Phoenix. Called and said, we need healing. So we did what we could. So it's also a really good remote healing tool. If any of you listeners would like a remote healing, all you have to do is email me, and there's no charge for that. We'd be happy to work on you, work on your loved ones. It's great. Now, with your maybe you could start, Judy, by talking a little bit about how many years you've done this and what exactly are you doing?
Well, I've been doing this probably 9 years, I'm thinking.
9 years.
Because I'll be 10 years this summer at the University of Minnesota Medical Center, and I learned it in my first year there. So, Jaentra, you opened up a whole new pathway for me that continues to surprise and delight me as I witness healing and peace come to people and places that are in such dire need of those gifts. And what that looks like on a day-to-day basis is because I have the lovely task, opportunity to visit patients in the hospital and to, see how I can offer support, how I can help them be in touch with their own resources and lean on their own values and beliefs to help them heal and to help them cope with the challenges that they're facing. Day in and day out, I'm seeing people who are suffering pain of great intensity physically, sometimes emotionally, mentally, lots of concerns about their families, about finances, about all manner of things. And when I see people, primarily what I key in on are pain and anxiety. When I notice that becomes a prompt for me to ask if a patient is interested in receiving 3-heart balancing. And many, many patients are. We've been, those of us in the hospital who are chaplains who have learned 3-heart balancing have been surprised over and over again that people don't look askance at this or suspicious about it or worried about it. Just people of all different backgrounds, of different faiths, of different cultures have opened themselves to us being with them. So I get to do 3-heart balancing with people who are in many, many different situations and witness wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things. So it's...
Do you introduce it as like a meditation, or do you introduce it as a complementary form of healing with kind of medicinal purposes?
Well, I'll tell them that I do a form of energy work that many people find to be very, to give a lot of peace and even relief from pain, and just ask them if they're interested in that. And if they want to know more about it, I mean, a lot of times people have heard of other modalities of energy work. They've heard of healing touch, or they've heard of Reiki. And so I'll say this is a distinct modality that operates on some of the same principles in terms of how energy flows through and within the human body and the world. And for some people who have Christian background, for instance, I'll draw the connection between early church practice of laying on of hands and praying for people. That, somehow there's that commonality.
Mm-hmm.
And then some people are interested in knowing more details about it, but mostly people aren't. It's almost as though three-heart balancing itself is a way of inviting people into a different relationship with themselves and the world that just evokes trust. So I have found over and over again that people grant me trust and entree to their lives that I didn't do anything to deserve. It's just a gift. And I often think that that's the part of
you think
the
it's part of the energy.
Yes.
It might be. It might be. If listeners, if you'd like to experience what three-heart balancing is, might feel like, you could do that right now by putting one of your hands on your heart and one of your hands on your navel. And, of course, set the intention that as we talk about this, that you can experience what we're talking about. But if you don't pay attention, decide to put your hand on your heart and your hand on your navel while you're watching TV or whatever you're doing, what that does is the heart is an energy doorway for being one with the heartfelt aspect of the source, that we're all beating hearts within the heart of God, as one of my teachers would say. And of course, the navel is the supreme energy doorway we all experience when we are in the womb. We realize that good food and love and good things come to us through our umbilical cord, and all our waste and what we don't need leaves through our umbilical cord. So three-heart balancing uses different energy doorways in its modalities, but it's still very simple. Those are the two prominent simple ones that anybody can learn pretty fast and do.
And people can find more out about it at healinghandsnetwork.org as well. There's a description of three-heart balancing.
I didn't realize it was 10 years ago that you took that class. That's a long time that it's been there.
That was in the University Chapel, wasn't it, that we taught? Yeah.
So what kind of patients do you work on?
I work primarily on patients who are going through the process of receiving a blood and marrow transplant, and patients who are on what we call a surgical oncology unit. So those are patients who have various types of cancer which necessitate surgical treatment for them. Also, when I'm on call, we take responsibility to go throughout the hospital. You sort of float wherever the need is. So I have opportunity to be with lots and lots of different kinds of patients, but for the most part, I'm with patients who are getting a blood and marrow transplant or patients who are in the surgical oncology unit. So people who have pretty intense illnesses and lives as a result.
That's got to be scary times for them.
It often is. Yeah. It often is very scary. I've had, when I said on call, we staff the hospital around the clock. So we take turns being on call at night and come in. We try to come in when there's a particularly compelling need, because otherwise then we're not there during the day if we're there too much at night. But I remember the first time, and this probably happened, Jaentra, within the first 6 months after I started studying with you. I got called like 2 o'clock in the morning, and this nurse said she had a patient who was anxious. And I was like, and what do you expect me to do?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, first of all, I was living downtown at the time, and there was a blizzard going on, and I'm a single woman in this really bad part of downtown, and I have to make my way from my building to the car, and I'm thinking, you think she's anxious?
Yeah, I'm going to be anxious by the time I get there.
But, I knew that was what there was for me to do. So I trusted that and told them I'd be there within about half an hour. And when I got there, the nurse was waiting for me and wanted to explain how intense this woman's anxiety was. And she said she can't stop crying. She can't sleep. We've tried everything. The drugs that we're able to give her have not been able to touch it. So I went in to see her, not knowing what I was going to do, just knowing that I needed to be with her. And as I spoke with her, the first thing that came up was to offer her 3-heart balancing. And so I did. And she accepted that. And she also wanted prayer. So I began to work on her. And within, I've seen this happen so many times now, within, it's surely less than 2 minutes, this woman who was beside herself and crying and tossing in the bed and became very, very still. And as I worked on her and then I concluded with a prayer, she was very quiet. And when I finished, I said, how are you doing? And she spoke again, and this time there was a tear slipping down the side of her cheek that was just a very tender tear. And she said, I never thought that anything like that could happen to me. This was the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to me. And of course, I'm entranced.
It's like, what happened to her?
Because, she just went into this deeply, bountifully peaceful place. And it happened virtually in seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And I witnessed that very frequently. And I'm always so grateful and awed by the power of this energy to be so healing.
I don't completely understand it, though, Judy. I mean, I know that you can.
I don't either.
You can. I've experienced it too. I know you can talk about it as love, a form of love. That's why I don't call it something like we didn't call it something like Reiki or Kofutu or it's love is what the energy is. But like I fairly recently was dealing with a married couple who were kind of at each other's throats and being really distant. And I don't do marriage counseling as such, but I think the man had something wrong with his knees and the woman had something wrong with her back. And so I told them what they could do to help each other, in terms of put your hand front and back on his knee and put your hand there. And that was all the marriage. Then they tell me their marriage is back together and they're flowing together and they're having the best sex they've had in years. And you go, well, that wasn't exactly, I can't advertise that I do that. I mean, and I wouldn't have known that. When I told him to do that, I wasn't thinking this will stop you from fighting.
Yes.
I wasn't even thinking that. I was just thinking, well, this guy's knees are falling apart. Let's see if we can fix that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I get startled, but, but you have more people in kind of awful situations, I'm guessing that you encounter than I do. So, have you've seen that happen other times too?
Oh, many, many times. Even staff. One of the things that we as chaplains also are available to do is offer support to the hospital staff because they're working under stressful conditions and pouring themselves out in many, many ways for people. And sometimes things happen, either they, feel overstressed at a time or something happens to a patient they weren't expecting that has a really negative outcome that's very upsetting. Or they experience the death, perhaps, of a patient they've been taking care of for a long time and have an important connection to. So for whatever reasons, I'm also kind of keeping my eye out on how the staff are doing. And I remember one night I happened to be in the hospital at, it must have been around midnight. And I was called to a unit where I ordinarily work, so I know the staff there and they know me. And as I was standing talking to the charge nurse, a woman in the hospital who was responsible for finding placement for patients, coming and saying, can we possibly get another person on this unit? And, do you have enough nurses and whatever? Came down the hall, and she approached the charge nurse, and she said, I have to ask you some questions, and you can't just talk back to me, and you can't just ask me questions. You just have to answer the questions. You could tell she was just deeply distressed. And I knew her very, very casually from seeing her on other units. And the charge nurse said, don't worry, sit down, and we're going to talk it out, and we'll work out whatever we need to work out. And I just felt drawn to stand nearer to this woman. And as she and the charge nurse began to conduct their business that was so stressful to her, I said to her, do you mind if I put my hand on your back? And she said, no. And thank you for asking. I said, okay. So I just rested my hand on her back. They had their conversation, which oddly enough did not turn out positively for her. The charge nurse didn't have whatever she was hoping she'd be able to provide for whatever quandary she was in. But when they finished the conversation, the charge nurse says to this woman, without missing a beat, now, you're going to stand up, and you're going to go with Judy down to the end of the corridor, and there's an empty room down there, and she's going to do 3-heart balancing on you. And so we both looked at her and obediently said, okay.
Wild.
And we were dispatched, and we went docilely down the corridor to the last room on the left, and we went in, and there was a recliner there, and this woman sat in the recliner, and she had really had it. She had it. And I began to do 3-heart balancing on her. And she's a pretty tough cookie in terms of things I've seen her go through and handle, dissolved into tears.
Cool.
Peace. I never knew you could experience peace like this. I needed this so much. And I'm just astonished that here in a moment, this woman who was really trying to give her all for taking care of more patients than it seemed like we could manage in the moment, and was sort of crumbling under the stress at that time, was returned to some place that just recreated her and revivified her. And in fact, when she later had surgery, she came to find me and asked if I would please come and work on her before she went into surgery and afterwards.
Good idea.
Yeah.
There's been proven lots of success with that it helps people before and after surgery. I think of some of the stories, Jaentra, that you've shared, and I'm sure you've seen. Mm-hmm. Well, her story probably is a classic example of what a difference it made for her, probably.
One of the social workers I work with had a big, heavy-duty back surgery a few years ago, and she will burst into this story at any opportunity. I hear her telling people about how she had me come and work on her before she went into surgery, and that she was so peaceful and so calm and felt so wonderful. She said, they could have done anything they wanted to me. I didn't feel any pain. I felt no concern or anxiety. It just carried me through. You just cannot understand what it's like. So she sort of speaks up for that when people...
It kind of comes to mind. I know one of the goals I have with the Healing Hands Network, and, we're looking at trying to get money to help veterans, but can you imagine veterans and their families and all the horrors of war that they have faced in the firing? If we could have our volunteers connect with the veterans in Minnesota, who knows, make it a bigger thing than that.
National.
Yeah. To have them have a sense of peace in a body that has just faced that kind of war would be great. Up time for station identification.
Help us in supporting our cause and visit healinghandsnetwork.org and click on the donate button to give your tax-deductible gift today. Your generosity promotes the continual efforts to send volunteer healers around the nation to offer their gifts to the benefit of mankind. Your support makes this possible. Thanks for helping. We appreciate you.
If you're interested in learning more about Jaentra Green Gardner, your host of Healing Journeys, she has a book titled A Healer's Voice on Spirit Quest Radio under Store eBooks.
This is Spirit Quest Radio, talk radio for your body, mind, and spirit. You are listening to Healing Journeys with your host, Jaentra Green Gardner, coming at you live every Thursday between 5 and 7 Pacific Time. This is where Jaentra talks about the art of healing and that everyone can do it. Now, if you'd like to call in to ask a question, you can do so by calling 1-201-793-9022. And we are in conference room 957-9082. Then press star 9. You can also Skype in if you so choose. Please feel free to join us in our chat room for lively discussion, dialogue, and questions. Now, let's continue on this evening with Healing Journeys with our host, Jaentra Green Gardner.
We're back, and we're talking with Judy Connelly about some of the miracle, peace, evolving, peace-feeling effects of three-heart balancing.
And I wanted to add something to what you were saying about the possibility of working with veterans of war.
Yes.
Because I'm convinced that not only would three-heart balancing be a very, very potent, timely avenue for healing for these people who have experienced so many horrors, but for their families. Because I think one of the costs of war is bigger than the person who was at war and comes home. Then the whole process of rejoining a family roles have shifted. Perhaps finances are more difficult. Perhaps that person is psychologically wounded in a way that has very deep negative impact on the rest of the family. So I think that part of that initiative would be to help heal that individual's whole environment, their whole system, their whole network of relationships when they return from and experience the ravages of war over and over and over again.
I would agree with that. When you think of the family unit and people that are thrust into the role of bill payer and financial commandant of, directing what gets paid when, and all of a sudden now the roles, sometimes the family wants to reverse those immediately upon that veteran's return.
Or don't want to at all.
Or don't want to relinquish it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got both sides of that spectrum where either they do or they don't, and that vet may or may not be ready for that process. So there's that dynamic too, that I think three-heart balancing can alleviate away some of those worries and create that tranquility.
As far as we can tell, what three-heart balancing does is brings the body rhythms into a new harmony with itself. You're taking the breathing, which is a rhythm, and your heartbeat, which is a rhythm, and the peristalsis, that's the rhythm where you swallow your food, and then there's your cranial sacral rhythm. And by putting your hands on key places, you're basically putting that body into a different harmony. And of course, you're reaching up for the rhythm of the source or God, or, the vibration of love that comes through the gravitational field. And it is that simple. And almost because it is that simple, it's hard to explain how simple, why would that work?
Yeah.
Why would that work? It's so simple. You're not drawing energy lines on the body. You're not saying foreign words. You're not, pawing your hands in the air trying to take bad energy out of something.
Right.
You don't need to have mood lighting. It's too simple.
And part of, you've heard some of my stories before about my astonishment at that simplicity is to see the power of three-heart balancing, doing it on the bus, standing in the lobby. It's
right.
just, you really don't need a whole lot of special equipment or treatment or preparation, or it is elegantly simple.
It's definitely low cost and could be part of healthcare reform.
Well, now that's a thought. I was recently in a class that I was part of teaching, and we were going through an exercise, and we had an odd number of students, and so I ended up joining a student, and it was a simple exercise in just following each pair, put their hands up so that your hand was just maybe an inch away from the hands of the other person, and one person took turns leading and the other person followed, and vice versa, and then you were supposed to get to the point where you were moving your hands and nobody was leading. So this very simple little exercise, and when we finished it and we sat down, and the person who was moderating this part of the class asked people about their experiences, and the fellow that I worked with was quiet, and several other people spoke, and then somebody said, "You look like you need to say something. How was that for you?" And he said, "Oh my gosh, it was like at a certain point I felt like I dropped into my body into this really powerful place, and your hands," he was talking to me, he said, "your hands were full of love. It was like you were ministering to me and holding me and lifting me up and healing me. It was absolutely astonishing, and it felt so wonderful." Well, I didn't know what to say.
You weren't there sitting there trying to figure all that out or do anything,
I was
right?
just doing the exercise, but doing it in a way that was mindful. I certainly was intentionally being present to him. Right. And relating to him. And when we left the class, eventually, by the time I got out of the building, he was standing outside the building. As I walked by, he said, "Thanks for the dance."
Okay, then.
So it's always surprising me that even, that it's so simple and ready, this force of love, that it shows up in ways that I certainly don't expect or intend.
It is amazing. Yeah, it comes to me to talk a little bit about Ava. Ava's, I think she was 5 years old when she died, and she may be 6, I think 5. And I'd seen Ava, and other volunteers of the network had worked on Ava, and she had, I'm trying to remember what kind of cancer she had. Anyway, she was alive a lot longer than they thought she had. And I remember her parents saying goodbye to me, like a month before she died. They were going to take her to California, and she was going to have some specialized medical treatment there. And so I think it was the day before she was supposed to leave for California that she ended up in the University of Minnesota hospitals. And what happened is she had a tumor somewhere in her brain, on her brainstem, that had herniated into her spinal column. So she was on life support, and it looked, it looked like she was going to die. And of course she did die that day. So that I get the call from their parents, and at that point, Clyde took care of all my patients that I see, clients I see here at home, so that I could go there. And I got to see three-heart balancing in a different kind of way. When I got there, this little girl's body was very, very cold. And, it looked like she was on, she could die any minute. I mean, if they just turned the breathing machine off. And, of course, her parents weren't ready to have them turn the breathing machine off because this was a new idea to them. And so I started putting my hands on her. And I think it took 2 or 3, maybe 3 hours when I was working on her, the room kept filling up till there were like 30 people in the room, including the girl's pastor from her church and, all the relatives. I mean, everybody was there. And what was wonderful about it was that everybody had their hands on this little girl, to heal her, to share love with her. And I don't think they expected a miracle. I'm not saying they would have objected, but I think they were participating in the connection and in the love and in the whole, it's not like they were saying goodbye in a way either, but they wanted to be there for this little girl. And what was interesting to me was hearing them talk about the things they were feeling in their hands. They were feeling all kinds of pains, and sometimes they'd feel like crying, and sometimes they'd be happy, and sometimes they'd be angry, and sometimes they'd feel cold. And I just think that they were helping this little girl's body release every single icky memory that she might need to let go of this lifetime before she died. That they were healing her in a way that was wonderful. But what was wonderful is they got to express their love that way. And it made me remember when I'd had one of the first classes, not the class you took, but the class before that I taught at the University of Minnesota. Greg Plotnikoff was in that class, and he experienced the simplicity of three-heart balancing. At that point, he said that he wished that every family in the hospital could learn that, so that they could do that with their family member if they chose to, instead of watching Gilligan's Island or watching the monitors and worrying. But this was just a great send-off, and I know the mother. I suggested she listen to the best medical advice. She said to me, if we kept going, do you think she would have a miracle? And I really think that if she was going to have a miracle, it probably would have happened in the first half hour, or so. So they did unplug her, and she did die that day. But her skin was warm, and she was rosy, and she, had changed, in that time. So I got to see three-heart balancing heal that group of people. Beautiful. It was really beautiful.
It's like there was an essence of love or something.
Yeah. And they felt completely comfortable. There wasn't one person who didn't want to touch that little girl. And, then it got to be those kind of healings where there's a circle of people touching her, and then people touching the people who are touching her because there wasn't enough room around the bed. So there was a concentric circle.
Yes.
And so it was really wonderful.
Think of the healing that they got to say their goodbye, not knowing that they may or may not say goodbye, but also a celebration of that essence of love that filled the room, so that it was easy for the parents to say their goodbye and to make those tough decisions.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah. So, and you weren't there that day, I don't think, but, there were a couple other people, chaplains, that came and helped, that did three-heart balancing. This was years, I don't know how many years ago. It was quite a little while ago.
I remember one patient who was a blood and marrow transplant patient, whom I was very fond of. She was just a lovely, lovely woman. And she had two equally lovely sisters who took turns coming from different parts of the country to stay with her and walk with her through this long, arduous process, which in the end did not give her physical life back. And she began to slip away, and it finally became clear that it was time for her to return home to a nearby city in hospice. And she had enjoyed three-heart balancing many, 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 many times from me. So her sister, who was going home with her, who was a college professor and mostly related to new information in the style of learning that was very different than how you learn how to do three-heart balancing, said, is there anything you can teach me about how to help, say, Mary, her sister? And she said, and is there a website where I can learn more about this? And I actually did have a moment's hesitation about sending her to your website, because I thought it's such a different mode of thinking than she's used to. But she asked for the website. So I gave her the website, and I did teach her a few things to do. So a few days later, I get an email from her, and she says, Well, I went to the website, and this stuff is, and then it's written in caps, loony. However, and then she tells me the story that her sister, the patient, Mary, had lapsed into a deeply unresponsive state. Her brother was coming to visit, and I had been to see her a couple of days before, and the patient herself was very agitated that her brother wasn't bringing his family because she knew this was a goodbye, and she wanted to be able to say goodbye to his wife and children as well, and he wouldn't permit them to come. And they had always had a somewhat restrained relationship, or sometimes strained relationship. She just didn't have the kind of access to him that she had to her two sisters. So there was all this kind of in the air, her own anger and wanting to have a proper farewell. And I just, when I was ready to leave, I said, I know that you will handle this in a way that has great purpose and meaning and love. So off I went. So here comes the explanation from the sister. So Mary had entered this deeply unresponsive state. Wasn't eating, wasn't responding to anything except maybe sharp pain. And it was time for her brother to go back to his home. And so she decided she didn't know what else to do. She felt at wit's end, and she was doing 3-heart balancing, as I had taught her how to do a few things for her sister, who then woke up and was able to have a visit with her brother before he left. She wanted to eat. She was hungry, and she wanted to have a visit with him. And when it came time for him to leave, he stood up, and she reached her arms out so that he hugged her. And she said, Danny, I love you. Nothing came back. And then she said, I thought, just sheer inspiration. She said, Danny, do you love me? So instead of the anger that she had been feeling before coming out, what came out was an invitation to this man who really experienced some huge obstacle to being able to express that. And of course, in the moment, he broke down and wept and said, you have no idea how much I love you and how I pray for you every day and how I would give anything for you to be well. So her sister went from looking at the website and how loony this is to then giving this testimony of, however, that her experience was that it had, again, as you and I have just been talking about, had an outcome that we couldn't have possibly expected, and very beautiful.
Well, yeah. I think the simplicity of 3-heart balancing is loony. It's as loony as people who starve to death in a grocery store. I mean, it's all this love is around, and it's so easy to tap, and it's gravitational, and it does all these wonderful things. It makes you go, sure. Sure it does.
But I think there's a simplistic hope that as more and more people discover 3-heart balancing and ways to do hands-on healing, that there be a healer in every home, or that people have the opportunity to express that love to one another that they may not have been able to in the past. I think that's the thing that's so interesting when we do the Circle of Hands training for families. Oftentimes families don't know how to, they'll make the expression, how can I help you? But they don't know how to go beyond the how can I help you. And 3-heart balancing, or learning how to do circles of hands, gives people that opportunity to give something back and a vehicle for making that connection. So I think that's where that energy force comes in for connecting humans to humans, is through that process. So by the sheer energy of the sisters connecting through your training of them to be, novice recipient, novice healer, or co-healer, to then incorporating and bringing the brother into the group, you've created kind of this triangular love energy that none of them knew existed.
Absolutely.
Until they were put into the situation. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts that Three Hearts Balancing has to offer, is that simplicity of doing that. You can go to all the support groups, all the training, and all of the different classes that may exist, but they don't get to it as quickly.
And it's not even just as quickly, but wholly different outcomes. The scenario that I just depicted, you can imagine a lot of people advising this woman, well, if he's that cold and controlling and if he's that unavailable emotionally, you just have to, there's all this stuff that we tell each other to make what we think is peace with the conflict we experience with people we love. Well, how brilliant is it rather to cut through all of that and to just find a way to release the love that is there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Instead of punishing one another for the ways we experience that it's not there.
Okay. So, people who are listening can, of course, experience that without having you come and be their teacher healer. However, if they wanted, I suppose we could fly you somewhere if they would just pay your expenses. I just think
we have many people in our area here who could
do that.
Be powerful resources.
I know we do. And I think, what could we say? Words enough to just encourage people to go ahead and try things. I've said on the radio before, email me if you've got somebody hurting in some way and you want to know what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Without my teaching you face to face. It's easy to learn and easy to do.
Do you think there's a fear that people will do it wrong?
Yeah, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's it. I know when family members have come and started being more confident about working on somebody, that I've taught them how to help that person, they just naturally then get into helping other people. Mm-hmm. They said, well, you never told me what to do for somebody with a headache, but I figured if I put my hand on where it hurt, that would do it. So they some people actually start experimenting. And that's really good.
I think a lot of that's tied to empowerment. And as the person feels more comfortable and you learn a little bit and you gain a little bit of success, like the professor, I don't know, maybe she doesn't do it in her day-to-day work. Today, however, there may be a day that she calls upon it and feels empowered because she recalls back to the experience that she saw with her two siblings. Where she's like, oh, I got an idea here. How about if? And what that could do for somebody.
I think it was years ago, a woman and her family flew out of New York City to see me, and the woman had Lou Gehrig's disease and she had multiple sclerosis, and she'd been fighting those for a number of years. And they had heard, I think through a friend of theirs, that some of the astoundingly good things that we've done with people with multiple sclerosis. So I think they were thinking that she would come away feeling better or have some kind of a healing. So when people fly from out of town, then I think it was 5 hours a day she was worked on, in my home here.
I remember that.
And then, a bunch of volunteers and stuff came. And of course, I never heard her speak. She couldn't speak anymore. Her family spoke for her. And the first night, after they got the first night's sleep that they'd had in something like 5 or 6 years, they hadn't really been able to sleep through the night because of whatever dynamics or pain they were going into. So that looked pretty good. That was a good start. And I, of course, didn't know her. I mean, I hadn't met her before that time. I didn't realize till I heard from her family later that she was a very, very angry, very, very bitter woman with a very mean, nasty streak. And what seemed to change in the I think they were here 3 or 4 days, what seemed to change was all that she stopped being mean and nasty and angry. And I don't want to judge her because I don't know how I would feel if I had Lou Gehrig's disease and multiple sclerosis and had to deal with those traumas and that process. I mean, I think it's hard to be take the high road all the time. You know, when I'm suffering, I can be obnoxious. I know I can. And so when she flew home, I think 24 hours later, she was hospitalized, and she died 2 days later. So she was really coming here, I think, with the kind of her soul's purpose to, come to a peaceful place. And they, as soon as she went into the hospital, they all gathered around her bed and kept their hands on her the whole 2 days. And then all their New York friends, they trained them what to do. So it was really great to hear that story from them and and they were so grateful that she'd finally found some kind of peace after years of that kind of angry bitterness.
Wow, that's a very powerful healing.
Yeah, you can remember her. She was.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
I do.
Vividly.
Yeah.
But it's amazing what some souls have to go through to learn or discover. And I think it's different for each soul. And for her, that was part of her journey, or her soul's journey, maybe.
When I think about it, probably she's the first person that had a transformation before she died. I sometimes think, part of our human condition, we think if we want to have a transformation, we're going to have to die to do it. Because that's a for sure slam dunk. We're transformed. It's done. But I've seen that was a case where she transformed before she died. And maybe that's what she needed to do before she died, period, is to come home to herself. I don't know. Have you seen people do that?
Oh, yes. I remember a very dramatic incident involved a woman who had relapsed uterine cancer, and she had horrendous treatment. I mean, the surgery for this you don't even want to know about. It's just awful. But she wanted to try it. And she put a lot of stock in it, and she suffered immensely in many, many ways. And then her disease returned. And she had been so willing to try anything up until that time. I had been seeing her as a chaplain. I was actually delighted that while she had a faith practice that I suspected might keep her away from wanting to have 3-heart balancing, she welcomed that and responded to it very well. Well, when her disease returned and the doctors had to tell her that they had no other curative treatment to offer, she plunged into despair. And when I walked into her room, the room was darkened. The blinds were drawn. She had sent all her family away. And this had been going on for a few days. I had been out of town. And because we already had the relationship that we did, I went in to see her, and I asked her if she would like 3-heart balancing, and she nodded yes. And I asked her if she would like me to pray with her, because she was one who really appreciated prayer, so I included that. And I was working on her feet. And I remember as I was working on her feet, all of a sudden, at some point, she cried out, just this sharp, oh! And it startled me for a moment, but I really wanted to honor her process and not interfere with it at all. So I just continued my work on her, but I just kept an eye on her. And I noticed little tears coming out of the sides of her eyes and rolling down her face. And when I finished, I said to her, "What happened?" And she said, "It's gone. it's gone. And I said, well, what happened? And she began to make a gesture of pulling something up off of her chest with her right hand, like she was grasping something. And she said, it's gone. Somebody lifted it away. I didn't even know it was there. Somebody lifted the weight away. It's gone. And, I'm still puzzled about exactly what this signified. And she looked at me and she said, and now I know everything's going to be all right. And she went in that instant. It was like a heartbeat from being completely despaired, not even allowing her family to be around her, to totally at peace, totally available. And the next morning, her husband came to me with tears in his eyes and said, I don't know what you did for my wife, but please keep doing it. You have absolutely no idea what this means to us. So it was that kind of transformation that I certainly, again, I couldn't have anticipated it. I didn't understand it, except that there was something that happened for her that was very, very deep, very instantaneous, and left her in a place of such incredible peace and love rather than despair and anger.
This is a great place to take a station identification break. If you're interested in learning more about Jaentra Green Gardner, your host of Healing Journeys, she has a book titled A Healer's Voice on Spirit Quest Radio under Store eBooks.
You reached a centering place. Spirit Quest Radio. Talk radio for your body, mind, and spirit. You are listening to Healing Journeys with your host, Jaentra Green Gardner, live from St. Paul, Minnesota. Jaentra with Healing Journeys broadcasts live every Thursday evening from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. In her over 30 years' experience, Jaentra knows how healing changes lives. Her guests share many perspectives to challenge and inspire you. She opens her heart to share knowledge and receive your stories. Talk to her and experience support for your life changes. Listen and learn simple healing techniques you can use at home. Now, here's Jaentra.
Hi, and welcome to Healing Journeys. We are having a discussion tonight with Judy Connelly, who is an ordained minister, a chaplain at Fairview University Hospital in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and St. Paul, I guess. We are talking about her ministry there, and her integrating three-heart balancing, a form of hands-on healing that was really developed by committee. Okay, I'm kidding, kind of kidding, but not really. We always we use the open source method. So three-heart balancing's been evolving over the years. So as soon as we think we know how to do it and exactly how it works, then we find out new information, and it gets upgraded and changed all the time. So that's just part of the excitement. I'm very fortunate to have a number of very intelligent and gifted people surrounding this energy, contributing to it. Professionals from, Fairview University, the University of Minnesota, public health nurses, wonderful hotel managers, airplane mechanics, teachers. That's why we have such a great group of volunteers. I mean, they have these wonderful full-time jobs, and three-heart balancing is their fun outlet to do evenings and weekends for those people who would like to receive a healing. And, the thing that you described with your patient the last hour, yes, she was grateful, but, I'm just saying that does feed you in a certain way. Unbelievable, isn't it?
Tremendously.
So, it's one of those things I'm trying to say. It feels so good to do.
And it certainly expands my trust in life's own process and ways, that to just trust that there's immense richness and love at stake and, just waiting for us.
Right.
No matter what kind of a fix we're in.
Well, I just love your stories, Can I get you to tell any more?
Yeah. I should say, can you stop me from telling anyone?
No, we love them.
Well, when you asked the question transformation, I thought of another one too, but it wasn't with the patient. There was a patient who was going through treatment. She was doing a blood and marrow transplant. Young woman, mid-30s, had been divorced, was remarried, and her 14-year-old daughter was living with her and her new husband, and they had a very close relationship, all three of them really, but especially this young woman and her mother. And she was fit and wonderful, and she was much loved, and everybody just expected that she would do really well. And in the end, she had a very serious brain hemorrhage, and it was clear then that she was not going to survive. She had a huge, loving family that would gather in the family lounge and just about overwhelm the space because there were so many of them and so much going on. And the night, of course, that it was clear that she was not going to survive, everyone was in the family lounge. Now, the 14-year-old was, after all, 14, and in some ways sort of distanced herself from what was going on with the rest of the family. And they couldn't get her to talk about how she was feeling. She wouldn't go down and visit her mother. She was distant and a little bit, even negative with her grandma, whom she ordinarily loved, and nobody exactly knew what to do with her. They were all immensely concerned about her since her mother was dying. And so I had gone in with the family, and we had a conversation about a few things, and they asked me to pray with them, and I did. And then I just turned to the patient's daughter, and I said, you know what? I'm going down to see your mama. You want to come with me? And she said, she just nodded, and she came with me. We go in the patient's room. The first thing was this wonderful, wonderful, loving nurse who asked her when we came in the room, do you ever snuggle in bed with your mama? And she said, well, sometimes. And he said, well, would you like to get up in bed now and snuggle with your mom? We can move these tubes and whatever so you can get up and be with her, which I thought it was so dear. Well, she wasn't ready for that. And so I just said to her, I'm going to do some three-heart balancing with your mom because it's something she really enjoyed a lot. And she also would always ask me to pray with her. I'm going to do that. Would you like to help me with that? And she nodded her head. Again, she's saying virtually nothing. So I would stand on one side with the patient. She was standing on the other side. And I'd tell her where to put her hands, and we worked on different parts of her body. And this child continued to be rather impassive. She wasn't saying anything. I couldn't read from her face what was going on with her, but I'm like, well, I'm just doing what I see there is to do, and it'll go wherever it needs to go. When we finished, I stopped, and I looked at her, and I said, how was that for you? Did you feel anything? Her face almost exploded in radiance. And she said, oh, yes, I felt so much joy and love and sweetness. And it was wonderful. And I didn't know what to say. I was just stopped in my tracks. Here was this child. Around him was this loving family worried that she wasn't communicating and that she was angry and she wasn't wanting to see her mother and all that. And she turned into this glowing, radiant child. She was so excited. And for her, it was her mother communicating to her mother's own wellness and wholeness and loving affirmation of her daughter. So I said, well, I'm going to go back down and check on the family. Do you want to go with me? And she said yes. And as we went down there, we walked in, and so somebody said, oh, how was your visit? I said, well, it was really wonderful. And I said, I don't know if there's anything you want to say to, Jane, assuming that she might well just clam up and say no. And she said, and she began this, not just recitation, but display of how wonderful her experience had been with her mother. Well, you could have knocked over everybody in this room with a feather. Their mouths hung open in absolute astonishment. And this child was transfixed by the experience that she had just shared with her mother. And her mother died, and they asked me to do the funeral. And 2 or 3 days later, however long it was, that child still wanted to get up and talk at her mother's funeral and tell about this experience. And when she told it, she returned to that place immediately of just glowing and radiant and excited and happy about her communion with her mother.
Who knew?
Oh,
incredible.
So beautiful.
That's some love energy.
And to think the rest of her life, as she goes through the pain of missing her mother and the tears that will come, but she still has that immensely grounding final experience with her to take her to the truth about their relationship that continues. And
that makes me so happy to hear that story.
Oh, it's just so wonderful.
Amazingly good. Amazingly good. It just is, it has to be that we give everybody the opportunity to grow like that, to experience that. I can see that happening. I can feel that happening. Why not?
Yeah.
I think that's just such a validation of when we train and instruct people on how to do 3-heart balancing. We always talk about when you give a healing, you get a healing. There it is.
Yes.
On display. The daughter is healing on her mother, and at the same time, she's receiving this incredible healing that is profound.
Very much so.
So yeah, it's proof is in the healing.
Had another patient, also a blood marrow transplant patient, whom I did not realize would be dying soon. At that time, she didn't seem that ill at all. But we had a similar experience when I was working on her, and she also kind of called out as I was working on her feet again. And when I asked her what happened, she spoke in almost the same language that the first woman had that I told you about earlier. And when she had been estranged from her father for, I think, 10 or more years. And when I came back the next day and went in to see her and see how she was doing, she had spent 3 hours on the phone with her father that night after I left. The two of them just, coming together again and talking and sharing and forgiving one another and just charting a whole new relationship, a renewed relationship.
Interesting. For some reason when you were telling those stories, Jody came to mind. Jody's somebody that I worked on who flew in from Denver. She had a very odd form of cancer that left her liver really, really distended and kind of, she had this whole pouch of tumors, in her guts, and very strange person. She'd taken my classes in Denver, but she would not allow any of the Denver healers to work on her. It was a bone of contention. She only wanted the great and powerful Jaentra to work on her, not any of my students. And she had such an aggressive form of cancer. I said, you're going to die if you do this way. You need more than this. I'll say just about anything I can, and it's my truth. It's whatever. Anyway, she was here, and there was a feeling when she walked in that a deep energy feeling, and I guess it's like the sense of death hanging in the air. It's that, and it was like she was here almost 3 days before I could feel that energy clear out. And somebody had a hold of her feet, and I think I was sitting in this chair in the living room, and they were in the massage table. I think it was one healer and her working on that. And this woman had no faith of any kind. She wasn't Christian. She wasn't Jewish. She wasn't anything. She kind of didn't believe in much, to put it mildly. However, and she wasn't drug induced. She had this feeling, and then she thought she saw, who knows, I think she saw Jesus standing to the side of her, working on her heart. And she completely changed in that moment. She knew that some kind of faith was guiding her, that Jesus was a real person, that he was really there for her. And she opened up to Christianity in a way she hadn't opened up. Now, my fantasy about three-heart balancing is that it's not a Christian necessarily only, so if it had been somebody who needed to see Buddha or needed to see Elijah or needed to see, whoever would waken their connection with the divine, that would have happened. But that was a very strange. That's the only time something strange like that's happened in my house. Usually I don't see things, and people who come and receive don't see things either. But that was the first time. I've had visions, though. I remember the vision of Jesus that I ended up teaching in class. I was working on a man who had cancer in his bones, and I didn't like him at all, personally. He wasn't a charming person. He was mean. He always thought that I should get more training in doing healing because I couldn't instantaneously heal somebody. The fact that three-heart balancing universally takes cancer out of bones. I've never heard of a person yet who's tried to get three-heart balancing because they had some kind of cancer in their bones, that cancer wasn't vibrated out of their bones. Now, it doesn't mean they don't always survive. Sometimes the cancer will leave their bones and then go to their liver or lungs or something, and they still die. But I think the bones are such an integral part of our bodies, how our body moves in the world, all our muscles and organs and everything else hang from them, that when it comes to the wave and all the rhythms of the body, it's like, let's keep the bones intact, is my guess about why that is. And of course, again, that could be lunacy, quoting your friend. We have no idea really why. So anyway, I have my hands on his liver, and I'm thinking about how much I don't like him. I'm thinking about this, the cancer that's in his bones, and then all of a sudden I had this vision, and in this vision I have a hold of him like I'm a mother cat holding him by the scruff of the neck. So I have him, and he's like all crouched up underneath my hand. And I look up and see Jesus, and I actually see Jesus' feet. So then I reach up my hand, and Jesus grabs my hand, pulls me up next to him, and there's this huge burst of light. And so me and this guy are next to him. And then all of a sudden I'm back in the room, and I'm feeling his body change. Finally he gets his instant healing that he wanted so badly. It was wild.
What did he say of the experience?
I don't know if he knew. He was a clueless dude. So sometimes I think the transformation happens for the healer.
Mm-hmm.
He still got he got the cancer vibrated out of his bones. He's still alive today, and this happened. God, this had to happen 10 years ago. So he's doing pretty well. I would have heard if he died.
Mm-hmm.
He's not my best friend. We don't communicate on a yearly basis. But I know people who know him and know his wife still, so I would have heard.
So he's healed in an instant even though he doesn't know it.
Well, I don't know if he was healed in that instant. All I know is that his scans came back clear the next time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing he was healed in that instant because that was my experience.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it could be sheer lunacy.
What's interesting is we gauge so much against the measurement of Western medicine, cure or not cure, versus we don't have terminology for it.
Mm-hmm.
When someone energetically changes, we don't really, it's like a spontaneous miracle, but we don't really have an explanation for it. And so we rely on, Western medicine terminology of, well, his scans were clear. to make that connection for somebody. But I just think of how his energy must have changed in that instant that allowed for that continued healing too, that we sometimes don't recognize.
Yeah, I just think...
And think what it did for his family.
Well, physically he changed. I don't think he emotionally or his personality didn't change. Like the stories you were talking about, the people's personality seemed to change.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes there's a healing where there's no personality change.
Or it's more physical than emotional.
Yeah, or something. At least in his case there was. Very strange. I know the couple I talked about earlier where the guy has glioblastoma and the woman has leukemia. Yes. His glioblastoma is down to a speck. He had a 2-centimeter tumor that now is supposedly 2 millimeters.
Wow.
And they both decided they don't want any more scans. Not for a long time. And I think that's interesting. I didn't suggest that to them. But they can see he's improving. That he's, recovered his ability to walk, and he's more balanced than he was, and he's, physically, his body's coming back. And I think they're looking at the trial of what it's like to wait and see, and the whole, emotional roller coaster so that can be. And then they found out some of those scans, it depends on who's reading it and is it right. And,
And what do they have to gain from it financially or otherwise?
Right. So.
I think it's interesting if you look at Western medicine with scans in particular as it relates to like spinal injuries or like your back and your neck and such. It's about a 50-50 where somebody completely healthy, living without symptoms, actually can have a much more screwed up spine than somebody who actually is injured and displaying symptoms, which I think speaks to what you're saying. What the family wants is if he's living symptom-free and he's showing continuous improvement, what's the necessity of the scan?
Well, frankly, there are doctors who try to explain that to patients, and patients and families insist, we wanted this scan, we wanted that scan. And, there are a lot of times when they can't be sure that what they're seeing can be correlated to what's causing this pain or whatever, or that you see things that then have you scurrying around to maybe do a biopsy, and it's nothing. So that's one of the example in healthcare today of where our expenditures are so high, and it's because sometimes the people are driving. It's sort of like a consumer thing. No, I want more's got to be better. More scans,
or a validation of proof because of the way we've been trained into the thought process. I'm enjoying these healing stories. You got another zinger?
Another zinger. A funny one just popped into mind. I had this happen with 2 women who were on the surgical oncology floor at different times where sometimes you see these couples where the woman is very vivacious and kind of out there, and her husband's sitting over in a corner, clearly broadcasting, "Don't come near me. Don't talk to me, and for sure don't touch me." I remember one woman in particular where she had this excruciating migraine headache, and she was getting meds out the wazoo, and it was not touching this pain. And so I, offered her, I asked if she might be interested in trying through heart balancing, and, sure, what could it hurt? And in short order, it just dispatched the pain completely.
Yeah.
And she insisted that I work on her husband.
Uh-oh.
Oh, my God, you've got to feel this. You cannot believe what this woman can do. Oh, my God, you've got to let her put your hands on her. Well, this guy's like, no, those hands are not getting on this body. But, it's, I'm sitting there watching the contest of wills here because the wife
you're stuck in the middle of it.
Absolutely determined that he's got to experience this amazing healing. Well, at least I'm smart enough and trained as a chaplain not to, get caught up in that and go start working on the husband unless he asks for it. But it's been funny a couple of times of seeing that happen because the wives in both cases were so amazed and they wanted their husbands to experience some of that lovely goodness.
To believe in.
And probably he did experience lovely goodness in that you did not go over there and force it down his throat. You got to set a boundary, baby. Boundary. Love comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes.
Oh, I like that story.
Jeez. Well, yeah, there was a relative of somebody that's connected to Clyde's family who had, what's that? Chicken pox that turns into terrible pain.
Shingles.
There you go. He had shingles in his eyes. And his eyes were just horribly hurting. They couldn't do anything about it. So they were going to see he finally decided to try healing when they gave him, we'll cut the optic nerve.
Oh my God.
That'll take the pain stimulation away from the eyes. Oh. Well, plus it'll leave you blind, but who cares? So he's considering getting his optic nerve chopped away, so that he can stand this. And it makes me kind of shrug. I don't know how far as a culture, how out of it we are when it comes to healing. You have to get that bad, and then you're going to consider just
letting someone place their hands on you.
Yeah, it's like,
versus cutting it out.
Not like put your head
I'm
in
up against the wall. I'm going to have my optic nerve cut. I'm thinking about doing that instead of healing. It's like, no. It's a crazy world out there, is what I can say. So anyway, yes. And of course, it's one of those things, 3-art balancing has been notoriously good at healing shingles. Sometimes it takes 2 sessions. I think it took 2 sessions with this guy before he was out of pain. Saved his eyesight. Oh boy. Hallelujah. Oh my goodness.
And to him, it was probably just the virus running its course.
Yeah.
Oh, what a course. So do we have time for another story?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, another story that I have a couple of them. I know you've heard at least one of these, if not both. But one story involved a beautiful woman, 92 years old, who came to the hospital for this very difficult surgery to treat relapsed uterine cancer. And I was amazed that somebody her age would want to do it and that it would be allowed for them to do it. But she was in very good fitness. And part of what the patient ends up with is not only a colostomy, but then also what's called the Miami pouch that replaces their bladder. And it has to be catheterized all the time. And all of a sudden, this woman, it stopped working. They couldn't catheterize her. So they had taken her down to try to do this with the help of radiology a couple times. Extremely painful, couple of 2-hour sessions, very, very painful, no success. So they bring her, I see her on a Monday morning and hear what's been going on over the whole weekend, and she's been through these really painful sessions. And her doctor, the attending physician, he's a big physician in the Twin Cities, finally said to her, I'm going to take you down there myself and I will do it. And then found out that that was declined. She was not allowed to do that. So she had to go back and tell the woman that she could not do that. But they were going to try one more time to get her back down there to see if they could get this working. Well, this is when I happened along. And again, we had already had a relationship. She also had a very explicit faith practice and really loved to have prayer along with the 3-heart balancing. Oh, actually, I had not done 3-heart balancing with her before. But it was such a dire situation. And so she asked me to pray with her. And then I said, I'd be happy to do that. And I said, let me tell you about something else I sometimes do with people that they experience as being, taking away pain and so on and so forth. So she said, well, sure. So I worked on her, and I was prepared to do a nice session with her. But within 5-10 minutes maybe, transport showed up to take her down for this procedure. So, and she had told me about how awful it was. So she left, and I had to leave. And when I came back to work the next day, I was, really wanting to know what happened, of course. So I go in to see her, and I said, well, what happened yesterday? And she said, oh my gosh, you will not believe this. I said, oh, well, try me. She said, not only did it work, but she said, I have never been down there that I haven't spent 2 hours writhing in the most awful pain I've ever experienced in my life. And she said, I felt so good by the time that you left that I forgot to take the extra pain medicine that they usually give me before the procedure to help prepare me for it. And I thought, oh my God, oh no, I started to feel guilty. And she said, but I went down there, and I was down there for 2 hours again, and I never had a single pain. And I've never left down there that I wasn't sobbing in incredible pain. So, boom. No pain. They were able to solve the problem, and that was it. Just like that.
Unbelievable.
Oh, hallelujah. Time to let Clyde do his magic.
Make a difference and support a volunteer healing effort now by going to healinghandsnetwork.org and click on the donate button. A simple gift reimburses our volunteers for their expenses and maintains our web and contact numbers, which then gives you the satisfaction of participating in helping another human being connect with someone in a loving, respectful way. Thank you.
If you're interested in learning more about Jaentra Green Gardner, your host of Healing Journeys, she has a book titled A Healer's Voice on Spirit Quest Radio under Store eBooks.
This is Spirit Quest Radio, talk radio for your body, mind, and spirit. You are listening to Healing Journeys with your host, Jaentra Green Gardner, coming at you live every Thursday between 5 and 7 Pacific Time. This is where Jaentra talks about the art of healing and that everyone can do it. Now, if you'd like to call in to ask a question, you can do so by calling 1-201-793-9022. And we are in conference room 957-9082. Then press star 9. You can also Skype in if you so choose. Please feel free to join us in our chat room for lively discussion, dialogue, and questions. Now, let's continue on this evening with Healing Journeys with our host, Jaentra Green Gardner.
Hi, I'm back. I'm Jaentra Green Gardner, and I'm with Judy Connelly and Mark Wandersee, and we're listening to wonderful 3-heart balancing stories. And the truth is, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these. You're just lucky enough to hear Judy's, right now. So if you think I'm telling you the truth, anyone can do this. Gosh, don't you even want to learn it? Email me, babies. Come on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3.
Let's get some calls from people who want to.
In 9 hours, you can learn level 1. Judy, earlier you had mentioned that you had placed your hands on the individual's feet. And for our listeners who aren't familiar with 3-heart balancing, are you holding them? Are you massaging them? What exactly are you doing?
Just holding them. That's one of the things that is a huge benefit of 3-heart balancing in terms of a modality I'm free to use in a hospital. It doesn't involve manipulation. It doesn't endanger people who, for instance, have a low platelet count. And if you begin to massage them, you could cause bleeding. Mm-hmm. So it's just a very simple holding of those feet, which does feel good to me, too. I love one of the first things.
Plus, you can do it through the covers. You don't even have to. We're not talking about bare feet here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
although sometimes I go for the bare feet.
Yeah, right.
But I remember one of the first things that I heard from you that just so charmed me about 3-heart balancing was when you give a healing, you get a healing.
You like that?
Because I really do. My own belief is that we're designed for communion with one another. We're designed for connection. And so I never could sit easily with notions that you have to be careful of the bad energy you're getting from people. And
we do have a caller, I guess, who's got something to say.
Go ahead, caller.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Are you there,
Tamra.
caller?
Yes, I am.
Did that person... Where are you?
Can you hear me?
Well, I hope we didn't lose them.
Okay, we lost him.
What?
Anyway, we were talking about giving a healing and getting a healing. And, yes, 3-Art Balancing does that. And it is easy. I think one of the most effective healing things to do is working on somebody's feet. Because especially when somebody's in pain, you can pull a person's whole body out of pain just by holding onto their feet. You know, when Clyde and I watch TV at night, we are always holding on to each other's feet. You know, not that we're in terrible pain necessarily, but it's a wonderful way to accelerate somebody's healing.
Well, I think there's some core essence, and if you look at foot reflexology and the methods and the belief that the foot mirrors the entire body of a person, it's a great gateway to gain access to their heart, to their liver, to their brain, to their spine, and to different parts of their body that may be hooked up to monitors or an IV or a PICC line or, for that matter, a ventilator, and you wouldn't be able to get at that part of their body. You can access all of that at the feet so quickly.
I guess we've got another, maybe
Let's try it again. Caller, go ahead.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you? What's your name?
My name is Tamra.
Tamra, welcome.
And go ahead.
Well, I actually have been sort of tuning in and out, and I tuned in right at the moment again when you said, call in, babies.
Well, welcome, and I'm glad you did. We're with Judy Connelly. Judy Connelly's been telling us one wonderful miracle 3-Art Balancing story after another.
Yeah, so I just thought I would call in, and I would love to know more about it and how I can apply it.
Well, you just heard us talking about holding each other's feet. I don't know if you missed the part earlier where if you'd like to work on yourself, what you can do is put one hand on your heart, your physical heart, and your other hand on your navel. I mean, that's something you can do if you're by yourself.
Okay.
And you want to feel your internal healer come alive, or if you don't want to feel anything and you're just zoned out, you can watch TV and do that and still recharge your battery.
Because it'll still flow the energy through your body.
What kind of experiences with healing have you had?
I've mostly done work with the unconscious using NLP, and I've done lots of workshops with, like I did a 5-day workshop with Neil Donald Walsh from Conversations with God.
Yeah.
And I've been to Celebrate Your Life, and so I've been able to see a lot of different authors and healers, some mediumship stuff, and all kinds of good stuff like that.
So you've got the understanding, the consciousness of something like this would work. Sounds like what you just need is the practical. How do you do it?
Yes. Yeah, because I've heard you talk about it a lot.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Where are you calling from, Tamra?
I'm calling from Vancouver Island, from a town called Courtenay, British Columbia.
Okay.
Wow. Nothing comes to mind to tell you right away what else you could do. You know, I know that putting your hand on your heart and your navel isn't only something you can do for yourself, but it's something you can do for someone else. You know, for like any problem, you know, you're going to get to the crux of it.
Okay. Well, that's helpful because I'm a practitioner.
Okay. The other major energy doorway for creating health is the liver. The liver is the largest organ other than the skin, and it's on the right side of the body. So if you put your hand between the person's rib cage and their hip on the right side, you're going to be hitting their liver. So that's the other thing. When when I work on my people, I always bake their liver, which means I put a hand on top and a hand underneath and just hold that liver for, 20 or 30 minutes. That is for people who have, there is not a hepatitis A, B, or C or an HIV that hasn't been healed by several liver sessions. So the liver is an extremely powerful healer.
That's interesting that you should say that, because liver is definitely an issue right now.
If you, if you're talking about for you, you can put your hand on your own liver and put your hand on your navel to work on that.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know of anyone else in Vancouver that practices healing. 3-heart balancing, but
you can also have a trusted colleague.
And of course, we'd be happy to send you remote healing too. Like I was saying earlier, we do that at no cost to people.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thanks for calling in, Tamara.
You're welcome. Have a good show.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
When we were talking about the feet and the healing, and for our caller to do that simple practice of a hand on the heart and a hand on the navel, what always comes to mind, and that's why I asked Judy why you go for the feet. Having had a Christian upbringing, I always think the story of Jesus washing people's feet. And why did Jesus do that?
They were dirty back then, Mark.
Is that all?
Well, I'm just saying, you're walking
you're
walking like barefoot in the dirt. I don't know.
I was hoping it was something more mystical, but in my world, I think that's why we tune into the feet, and I think there's a historical purpose for those that maybe believe in Christianity and Christian beliefs, that not only is that the doorway, but also it's a show of respect for the person as well.
I do remember somebody who ended up being a lifelong friend of mine, and I was very naive, and I was in college. I think I was a sophomore in college, maybe a freshman, and I was on this couch, and she just started rubbing my feet or holding my feet, and I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm rubbing your feet." And I said, she said, "How does it feel?" And I had to admit it feels good. Then she said she thought that when you rub somebody's feet, now I never teach this in class, I'm just saying that's what she said, is that you're holding onto the worst part of them, because people are ashamed of their feet, they're smelly, they're dirty, the part that, and it's your way of saying you totally accept them.
Oh, what a lovely thought.
It was a lovely thought. I mean, I knew it was her way of saying I totally accept you, and, she has been a friend for life.
Interesting. And hygienically speaking, your feet are cleaner than your hands.
Yeah, I didn't know that, but I believe you. I know that when I do work on people's feet, I always go and wash my hands before I touch them some other place because of that kind of idea. So that they think I'm a healer that practices good hygiene. Where have those hands been before you touch me?
Good idea.
Right.
Okay, now, come on, tell your other story. You know which one.
Okay. Oh, this is about a woman who was also a patient on our surgical oncology board, who had also been through long and really serious surgery for relapsed disease, and her kidneys failed all of a sudden, very suddenly. And I came in one morning, and I heard this when we had report, and I went in to see her, and we had also, again, had a relationship already. She was a lovely woman. She had a fabulous sense of humor. She had a very meaningful faith practice. She was one of those people that everybody just enjoyed being around. But she was quite anxious when I went in this particular morning. And she said, "I don't know. They told me they may have to put me on dialysis. I can't believe that. I just cannot go on dialysis." And she said, "This is really serious." And she said, "I'm waiting for the doctor to come in." And I said, "Well, while you're waiting, are you interested in some 3-heart balancing?" And she said, "Oh, yes." So I walked to the opposite side of the bed so that I was seated at her bedside facing the door. And I worked on her for a while, and we chatted as I was working on her. And all of a sudden, the whole posse comes in. And you always know this news can't be too good when it takes like 8 people to deliver it. So it was the attending physician and many other physicians and physicianettes that came
Terrible.
in. And so the attending physician was explaining to her, your kidneys have stopped functioning. This is how we want to treat you. You'll need to go on dialysis. We're hoping that perhaps it'll spontaneously, they'll recover and you'll begin producing urine. But we just can't say, but we do have to put you on dialysis. And so she said, well, how much would I have to pee for you to think I didn't need to go on dialysis? And the doctor said, no, you don't understand. Your kidneys are not functioning. They haven't been functioning for hours now, and you do need to go on dialysis. And she said, I understand what you're saying, that my kidneys have failed and that they're not working, but just how much would I have to pee for me not to have to go on dialysis? And the woman started again. And finally, one of the other docs, I guess, just decided to answer the patient's question. And so she stepped around the side of the bed where I was, and the woman had a Foley catheter, which meant that her urine would have been draining into this bag hanging off the side of her bed. And so the doctor was going to say, like to what line the pee would have to come up to in order for her not to go on dialysis. And she stepped over by my side and looked down and went, oh my God, you're peeing. And the doctor looked at me and she said, I have no idea what you're doing, but you should definitely keep on doing it. And so there was great jubilation and confusion and consternation and whatever.
But they knew something, that you had something to do with it,
that she was peeing, And so then, of course, this woman was cracking up because she just kind of had a sense and keeping asking, well, how much would I have to pee so I didn't have to go on dialysis? So after all that kind of calmed down, I sat down on the other side of her and she said, would you say a prayer with me? I said, yes. So I did.
It's internet radio. You can say anything you want. Go, girl.
Okay. So said the prayer with her, and I used to, sing with her too. So I started singing to her. Peace is flowing like a river, flowing out from you and me. Well, of course, she just got hysterical. Luckily, because I suppose I could have been in trouble if that hadn't gone over well.
Which will bring us to our next show. Next week, we're having Paul Savette talking with us about laughter and healing.
Oh, yay.
I might have to retell that story.
I love it.
Because I'm sure you and her laughing about it increased the piss flowing like a river.
No doubt.
Oh, dear.
Think of the energy and the money that was saved by her with that simple act.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
And how complimentary 3-heart balancing can be to Western medicine.
Yeah. It makes me think of Jerry Getch. Jerry Getch died. It was Good Friday. God, what year was that? Do you remember?
99, maybe?
Yeah, it was before we met you.
Mm-hmm.
And we only knew Jerry Getch the last probably 2.5 weeks of his life. He had like 19 or 20 tumors. He had some kind of non-Hodgkin's something or other. He had 4 tumors in his brain, and his wife had kind of grabbed us at an expo and wanted us to do something with her husband, and we ended up driving to her house, which was like 5 minutes from where the expo was, and working on him.
That day.
And he was in terrible pain, just terrible pain. And it took 2 sets. We went back the next day, and after we went back the next day, he was out of pain completely. And he got enough strength to lift himself on and off the commode, which hadn't been happening. So we just sent people every other day. I think Teresa Marie and Carl went a few times, and Clyde and I. We're not expecting to save this man's life. I mean, I don't know what, we don't have expectations. We're just there to share love. So anyway, he ends up being hospitalized. Oops, 5 minutes. I better tell this story fast. And he's got a tumor that's blocking his urethra, so he can't piss. And so that's why he's in the hospital. Rose, his wife, wants to know, can we save his life? And I say, well, I don't know. Usually when somebody has their hand on the doorway going into the other side, they keep walking. We just make their way easier. So anyway, Mark was there and another healer named Lori, and we were working on him. And in 3-hour balancing, when you're trying to help someone, you don't touch their genitalia or any of that part. You touch behind their knees. That is the access doorway for releasing anything that has to do with sexuality or any of that. But his wife wanted to know if she could touch his genitalia and help with this thing, this lack of peeing. And what am I going to say? No, you can't touch your dying husband anyway. He peed all over her hand.
Oh!
And I was shocked. I said, no, let me smell. I had to smell it. And then we started singing When You're Happy and You Know It, Clap Your Hands. It was a great day.
Well, marvelous.
It was. And I thought, isn't a 3-heart balancing interesting? Because I know we can move tumors around. Probably we didn't dissolve it. We probably just moved it away from the urethra. But I always feel shocked, and it's like I'm entertained. I don't exactly know what's going to happen with people, but you never know. And it's always a joy to hear about all of your stories and what's happened for you. And I feel so grateful that you were willing to be with us and tell everybody again. Mm-hmm. It's a wild and wonderful time. And it almost sounds too good to be true. It's like crazy. We just, this is the kind of thing that I think should be on national news. I mean, if we're willing to talk about what Lindsay Lohan had on her, that she had something written on her fingernails, like, who cares?
This is much more important.
Yeah. What if we found that somebody who wasn't able to piss all of a sudden got to piss,
That's a big deal.
It is.
It's a miracle. And I wanted to add to that Jerry story, the energy of when you told about the mother-daughter earlier. There was a similar situation with Jerry and his son, and Jerry was actually able to converse with his son, who they hadn't really communicated with for some time, and to say his goodbyes in that whole process as well. So it was a pretty powerful day.
Morning, didn't we? Mm-hmm. It was a great, powerful day. And so those are the things that lift me up, that lift us all up and let us be together and say, well, sooner or later, the world's going to find out that healing is a gift for all of us, that we all deserve to feel it, and we all deserve to experience the giving it and receiving it, because it's part of the extended love that's available through what? God, through the gravitational field, through being alive.
Indeed.
Okay, coming up next at 7 p.m. Pacific time is the Living Proof Nutrition Show with Tamra. Her guest this week is Monica Nygaard, talking about transformational growth using NLP and timeline therapy. So listen on for that. And Mark and I are going to be here next week with Paul Savette, who's a wild and crazy man. He's a wild and crazy guy, and we're going to be talking about laughter and healing. So I bet we retell your piss story, because why not?
It ranks up there in the top 5.
That's right. So, thank you so much for being willing to be with us again,
What a
Judy.
joy.
Yes, thank you, Judy.
To be with you.
So, one more minute, huh?
Real quickly, Jaentra, we can add for those people that want to rebalance themselves to the grid lines as a result of that earthquake, that they can do the free download on frequenciesofbrilliance.com and listen to that meditation. And if they want more information on the Healing Hands Network, to go to healinghandsnetwork.org.
Now, read the Lunacy website.
That's
Email
right.
me.
Email Jaentra if you want a remote healing.
Or even if you don't, you just want to tell me something.
Like a good healing story.
Right. And know that I know we're transforming. The earth is being shaken up, and we're all being shaken up, so we can change into the more marvelous and wonderful parts of ourselves, and you are going to find the help you need, even if you aren't sure where it's coming from. I know that you will be led to find your inner truth, your inner beauty, and your inner love. Goodbye.
Good night.
You found Spirit Quest Radio, talk radio for your body, mind, and spirit. Jaentra with Healing Journeys broadcasts live every Thursday evening from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Time. Share with Jaentra your fears and hopes as you travel along your own healing journey. Go to Jaentra's websites at instanthealing.info and healinghandsnetwork.org for information, free podcasts, remote healing, and inspiration.